Welcome back to another video. So in this video, we are going to talk about the user ID. Now there are two ways to configure the user ID. So one will be the user agent. So it's just a piece of software that should be installed on your domain controller. And another one will be directly integrating with the Palo Alto. No need of software that is clientless, agentless. So for this one, I'm not able to do this one because of the inability to get that software, but we are going to configure the user ID using the directly integrating with the Palo Alto. So for integration, so you have to make sure that your Palo Alto is able to resolve your domain name. Okay, so first thing is that we have to make sure that Palo Alto is able to resolve the domain name. Another thing is that whenever the Palo Alto is trying to resolve the domain name, DNS name and everything, it will do it on the management interface. So if you don't want that management interface to be the source of certain services, you have the ability to change that one. So first I will show you how to change those things. So first what I will do, I will go to the device and in the setup, and in the setup I will go to services. And this is where first I will make sure that I will update my DNS servers over here, that is primary and the secondary. And another thing is that if you see on the service features, click on service route config, and you see that use management interface for all services. So if you can click on custom, and you see that for different type of services, it is using the default interface. So for example, if for the DNS one you want to change it to the different interface, then you can go ahead and select which interface you want to resolve the DNS name on that. So you do have different services, so you can say that different services should be resolved on a different interfaces. It's up to you, but management should be good. So because if I go back to my topology, you see that management is having a default gateway towards it. So whenever it is trying to resolve my accessible.com.au, what do you say, DNS name, so it will do the inquiry using the management IP. So the traffic will be coming this way, going to this way. And if it wants to resolve the Google, so it will go via the router and go towards the outside. That is my ISP DNS. So basically the management interface will go, all the traffic will go through the router and passing through the Palo Alto, through the firewall. Alright. So since it is a lab, so you shouldn't have any problem in configuring in that way, but in the management, in the production, you do have the DNS server over here which will help to resolve it very quickly. Alright, so let's go back here. So my DNS servers are up to date and my management interface will be resolving everything. So that means if I go to the interface on the management, I have to make sure that I should have a default gateway. If I don't have a default gateway, then I am not able to resolve the DNS names. Another thing is that I am allowing SSH, HTTP and ping. So currently I have the SSH over here. So what I will do is that I will turn off. So HTTP, SSH and ping is allowed on the management. So by default it is been allowed. So I will get the putty once again and I will type in here. So this is my domain name which I have created in my what do we say, domain controller DNS server. So if I say that ping pa.sysable.com.au, I'm able to resolve that name. So if I take the SSH connection to that name, so click on open, click on accept, and I will say admin and the password. So I should have a SSH connection on my former Palo Alto. So now that I have a SSH connection, so if I go back to my topology, so my management PC was able to resolve the DNS name using my Active Directory and the domain controller. Now let's configure the user ID now on the Palo Alto. And first thing is that I will check whether Palo Alto is able to resolve my sysable.com.au. So I will say that ping host sysable.com.au unknown. So let me go ahead and do a commit one more time. And if I also say that ping 20.1.1.2, because that is where my DNS server is. So it is able to ping to the DNS server. That should be all good. So if I say ping host sysable.com.au, and now it is able to resolve. Alright, so my Palo Alto is able to resolve my DNS name. That is my Active Directory. Okay, so commit is all done. Let it commit. Now the next thing is that I want to configure the user ID, means user identification should be enabled. So on this inside interface, inside zone, I have to enable the user ID identification. So if you see my topology, only PC1 and PC2 are in my inside networks, and this is also joined to the domain. So my domain will be sysable.com.au. Alright, so that is joined to the domain. Next thing is that I'm only applying detecting the users on the inside zone because I don't have any users on the outside. So outside we are not going to enable anyhow. And on the DMZ I do have a server farm only. There is nothing more. Only in the inside I do have the domain join, and that too on this particular subnet. So if I do not say provide any subnet, then what the Palo Alto will do is that it will scan for this subnet, this subnet, this subnet, as well as for this subnet, which we don't want. So if you want to say specific to Palo Alto that you just scan for these only one and one subnet, that is 172.168.2.0 network. So let's go ahead and configure that one now. So if I go to the uh, network, in that network I will go to zones. In the inside zone I will go ahead and enable the user identification. So click on add. Here I will give the subnet which it should be scanning. That is the only one it should be scanning. Okay, so zone thing is done. Now let's go ahead and configure the Palo Alto. Now if I go back to device, I should have an option called user identification, and in the user identification under user mapping, so I will click on settings. So I will say that username. So this will be the username of your domain controller. Now, username, I am using the administrator username because this is a lab, so that shouldn't be a problem. But in a production, you will be using the service account. All right, so if you just browse to the Palo Alto documents, Palo Alto has a good document on how to create the service account and how to assign the permissions on that. For this lab purpose, I'm using directly the administrator account. For that one, first I will give my domain sysable and then the administrator. The format is important because you see that format. So we will not be writing administrator at sysable.com.au. No, in this format you have to write it. Next, the DNS name will be this one, domain name, and the password for that administrator account or the service account which you have created. Kerberos server profile, we don't have any, so we don't worry. Next, server monitor, security logs are enabled. I will also enable the session ones, and I will say that for every 2 seconds, because whenever someone logs in, that session login details should be provided to the Palo Alto. Client probing, by default it is off, and until unless you want more details about the client machines, you will not enable it. So, but again, this one is a resource consuming, so it is recommended not to enable it. Cache, keep it as a default. Syslog filter, ignore user list. For example, now I do have an administrator account. So whenever the administrator logs into one of the PCs from the inside zone, if you don't want to detect that, if you want to ignore that user, then you can provide the list of users which you want to ignore. So currently it's a lab, so I'm just detecting all the users. So first thing, this part is done. Next thing is that where is my domain controllers? If I see my topology, you see that domain controllers are over here in the DMZ, and Palo Alto is able to resolve that one. So what I can do is that I can click on discover over here, and it says no domain configure. So if it is able to detect any domain controller, it will automatically show up, which it should be, because the domain name it is able to resolve it. So I will click on add manually, and I will say this one is Active Directory. Select the type as Microsoft Active Directory and the transport WMI and the network address 20.1.1.2. Click on OK. And again, here also I will say that which subnet to be included. So I will say 172.2. That means 172.168.2.0/24 subnet. I want to scan that only one subnet. So click on OK. So you see the status is currently empty over here. Once we commit, we should see that status is connected. So I will click on commit and commit. So let the commit finish. So currently, if I go back here and if I say that show user IP user mapping all. So currently I did the lab before, so it is detecting it has those details before. So I am going to use different users and we will try to get the different users, because that domain name, user, who is the user who logged in, and what is the machine IP, that is what we want to detect. All right, configuration commit is successful. Let me get the domain controller. So in the domain controller, let me see what users, because Moise is already over there. So what I will do, Active Directory users and computers. And in the users, I do have a Bob, I do have a Jess and Mary. So I will use the Bob one now. So I will take the PC one. So I'm on the PC one now, which is domain joined. And I will use the other user and I will say that sysable, and this one will be Bob and the password. Alright, so now you see that it is connected over here once we commit that one. So that means our domain controller status is connected. That's good. So now allow this app. I will say no, almost there. So now the Bob was able to log in into the same system before Moise was logged in. So he was able to log in. So that means a session log is generated. So let me go to the monitor now, and inside the user ID, and we should see the Bob over here now. And the same thing I should be seeing in the Palo Alto now. Instead of Moise, now it says Bob. Alright, so at this point, user mapping is good now. But it doesn't mean that you can use your users into your policy. Still, we have to do some different configuration for that one. So first thing, before you want to use your users, domain users in your policy, is that first we have to resolve your user mapping. And the next thing will be that we are going to configure the user, domain user, that is LDAP profile. So if I go to the device, and within that server profile, I should have the LDAP profile. And currently you see that there is one LDAP profile. I will select that one. So I've given a profile name AD, and you see that select the type as Active Directory, and the base DN I have given my sysable.com.au. I'm not selecting any particular group, I'm selecting the whole domain, so that's why I've given that one. So bind DN will be your username and this will be your password. I do not require any SSL certificate because that is not secure. So once you click on add over here, you can give a name, you can give a server IP address and the default port. Okay, that's what the configuration. So once that is being done, so what you can do is that you can load your users. So where you can load the users, let me go to the policy and click on add, click on source user, click on add, and you see that domain admin and users. But before we use in the policy, we will be adding somewhere those groups. So where can I add? Right, so let's go to device in the user identification. Yep, group mapping. And in the group mapping, you see that I have added two groups over here. So if I have given a name, I have selected the profile that is Active Directory, LDAP profile, and I have kept the details default. User groups and attributes, if you want to change, you can change here. Groups to be included. You see that on this particular Active Directory which I have added, I got all my user groups over here, but I have selected only domain users and the domain admins. Okay, so once you select that one, that's where you go back to your policy now. And within that policy now you can, in the source user, you can go ahead and use those users. So you can allow the traffic to that particular users, that group users and all those. Okay, so if I go back to monitor again, and what I will do is that here I do have a Bob. So just to make sure that we are getting the session details, I will log off, because you see that it is also giving you the session log off details. So let me go back to the PC. This time I will try to log in using Mary now. And if I do a refresh, and you see that Mary is been logged in now. Okay, so that means I'm getting the session details and everything. My LAP is good. My, what do we say, users are good. So next thing is that I just need to utilize those groups into my policy, and I can allow or block the traffic. So this was your user ID. I hope this was informative for you, and thank you.